I pulled this apart. I'm going to kind of show you how I got it apart later in the video and as I put it back together. But what I can notice here is that one of these sides is got a stripped sound to it. One of them sounds like it's driving fine, and I think that's the issue. I checked all the gears and the wheels, and it looks like none of the teeth got chewed up on the plastic parts. Interestingly, there's something in the drive gear motor in here that I got to look at, maybe even replace. So what I'm doing now is I've got my screw gun. I still have cables connected, so I really haven't done much else than take some screws out, take the little fan out. You have to pull to get this thing to fall away from the body of the unit. You have to remove a screw or two on the inside, pull this guy out, pull this little fan off, which just pulls off, and then you can actually drop this thing out of place, which I've just done. So what I'm doing now is I am removing all these screws. So I'm going to remove all these screws, get this thing off, and then I'll continue the video. So I've got all the screws out. I've set them aside here. You don't want to lose them. There's also a little pin with this gear that came off both these sides, and you don't want to lose that little pin because you need that. It's a very special thing. You're not going to find it just hanging around in your box of extra screws or something. So that's the kind of thing you don't want to lose. And I'm trying not to lose this other one. So I got it here. I put it right on the gears to keep those together. So I'm going to take a first look at this. It's my first time seeing the inside of this thing. And obviously this has to be sealed up from water. So this gasket, we don't want this rubber gasket to fall out of place. So let's see what we got. So I'm going to turn these gears. And there's a little, actually some little, I don't know if it's silicone or what it is that keeps moisture away from the circuit board and stuff. Let me try to flip this around and turn. I'm actually going to put one of these pins in to give this thing a turn. If I can grab it, it's full of grease. Alright. So I am taking this guy, sticking it back in there, and then going to give this a turn. I don't know if that's correct or not. Oh, I could see something fell out of place. Oh yeah. So this is busted or something on this side. I can already see it. It's a gear motor, and this gear has come apart. So I am not going to lose that. So I am going to take a closer look at this and then share the results with you. Hang with me. Alright guys, real quick, I just got a little channel lock, removed this outer nut, got my channel right, removed that, and now this is ready to come out of place. I can't really slide this gear motor out without removing this circuit board, so I'm going to do that carefully, not to scratch the traces on the board if I can help it. Try not to lose screws. Let's see what happens here. So that can get out of the way. Enough to pull this bad boy out of here. I may or may not be disconnecting stuff, but let's see what we got. So what happened? It almost looks like some screws fell out. This little gear looks good. The motor looks good. If this thing was secured to that, it would probably be driving correctly. So what I'm going to do is put the pin back in so I can turn this damn thing. And I'm holding the motor to the gear, and guess what? Everything's fine if that motor is attached to the gearbox, but as soon as it came away, it starts stripping. So that's definitely the problem. I'm going to get that pin and not lose it. So looks like there's some screws, but I don't hear. Ah, yes I do. So the screws fell out. And that's probably all that's going to be needed here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take the screws off this gearbox, find the screws, put it back on the motor, put it back together, and I will fill you in just a second. Hang tight. All right, guys, so real quick, what I did was I pulled these 4 screws out of the gearbox, and that allows me to separate it, but I'm going to separate this very carefully because I don't really know how the gear situation is inside, and I don't feel like just yanking it apart and having gears all over the place that I can't figure out. So I'm going to pull this ever so carefully apart, and that's good that the top cover just kind of came out. I'm going to make sure if there's washers and things that they don't fall out of place, and I don't know where they are. Looks like the gears are intact, and I see some screws down at the bottom of this thing. So I am going to hold the gears, get my screws, which I just did, and those have to go from the inside. Whoops, thank God that didn't fall apart. So look at that, 2 little screws fell out, go figure. And that may be all we have to do here. So I'm going to try to get them in place. 2 screws from the inside, tighten them up, get that motor on. And I'm going to do that and not bore you with the fine details. Sit tight. All right, guys, so real quick, what I did was I put those 2 little screws back. I looked at the cable on this motor because I want it to be tucked down underneath when we're done. I looked at this square face, and that's the square face, so it's going to sit in here like this. So when I oriented the motor, I want the wires to be out the bottom. I got those oriented right. I held it in my hand nice and carefully, got those 2 little screws in place and tightened them up with a really good tip screwdriver, and got them just tight enough so that they're not so that they're not loose at all. In fact, I tightened them real good without stripping them. So I think I'm all set. I'm going to put this back together, and we will pick up where we left off. So sit tight, and I will be back. Hey guys, so I'm back. Getting a little dirty, but I can handle that. So anyway, I got these 4 screws back in place. Sandwiched this nicely together. It went together cleanly and flush, which I know nothing fell out of place. Tighten those up real good. I don't feel like being back in here. And so what I'm going to do is slide this bad boy right, actually probably this way, so I can get the shaft out of here and get this ring on. And I'll snug that up in a minute. I'll get this board back in place. And it's kind of nice that I really didn't have to fuss with wires and stuff. The less you tinker with, I think, the better. So let's see if I can get that screw back in. And try not to tear into the circuit board while I'm doing it. Nice and easy. Get that 1 screw in. Give it another good little something like that. It's in place pretty good. This I'll snug up. You don't really need to see that. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to check this motor because I don't feel like coming back in here. That one seems tight. Otherwise, I would have probably pulled that out, taken it apart since it was pretty easy, and made sure the two screws securing the motor to the gearbox were tight. But that looks good. So anyway, I'm going to snug this up, and I'm not going to forget this little silicone thing or whatever. I think it's silicone, but anyway, I'm going to stick that in there wherever it's meant to go. Kind of make sure moisture doesn't get to this stuff, so I didn't forget that. So I'm going to snug up that ring. I'm going to make sure this gasket is perfectly in place, didn't fall out of place. I'm going to flip this guy over, land it down. Whoops, actually there's a gasket down here. So is the gasket here? Actually, it's not even a gasket there. The gasket's down here. So just want to make sure that's perfectly in place, because if water gets in here, this thing is toast. And in fact, I can see it's falling out of place. So I'm going to be real careful when I get this back together. Let me snug the ring up, and then I'll show you that in just a minute. All right, guys. So what I did was I took my handy channel lock, adjusted to the right thing, got that perfectly snugged up real good. I got my gasket down in its cavity perfectly. Now this is not difficult, but hugely important. So what you want to do is make sure And again, this is my first time doing this, but I want to make sure this goes down nice and perfectly flush without messing with that gasket. Because if that thing came out of this cavity, we're screwed. So that looks, and I'm going to kind of, before I start screwing stuff together, kind of feels nice and flush. Pretty sure everything's ready to go. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take all these screws, drop them into place, get my handy little screw gun. Actually, I'm going to have to flip it the other way. Set it so that I'm not killing it and cracking plastic. Get down there, and then I'm going to actually hand tighten each one at the very end. I'm not going to take the screw gun and jam it in. That's never a good idea. So I will be back in a second. Hey guys, so I got all these screws in place. I used the screwdrivers that I had after the automatic gun, got them in place, tightened them up as best I could, and what I found is that these tips of these Phillips are really not exactly right for these screws, and the very final tightening, because there's a rubber gasket that's critical, I want to actually make sure I get exactly the right bit, if you will, to fit these Phillips heads, and I think I got the right one here. I had to look through a few sets. I had to actually get a decent grip and put a glove on because it's 95 degrees in here, at least, probably. It's a hot summer day, and my hands are totally sweating, slipping, and I want to get a real good feel for each one of these screws, make sure they're as evenly tightened as I can get them, and then I think we're in good shape. So I'm gonna grab this guy off of here, set up a little manual version of a screwdriver setup, get this baby in here because that's just the right one, I believe. Might have been the same one as the one on the gun, but I don't want to be using that. And I'm gonna hand tighten, give those a final tightening, and we'll be all set, and I'll be right back. Hey guys, I'm back. So that was actually a smart move. I could just tell that when I went and tightened all these guys by hand, and in fact I went back around a couple times. You want to tighten nice and snug, but let's not get too crazy. If it's turning a little, that's okay, but if it's really fighting you, you probably risk cracking plastic, and we don't want to do that. But we do want them tight. So I'm just doing a little extra caution here, making sure these guys are really ready to go. Again, I don't feel like coming back in here and doing this again. So that looks pretty good. So what we're going to do is get these gears back in place. There's these little pins, slide them in the hole, get the gears on, and very carefully get this baby back in place. I checked all the gears to make sure there's no chipped teeth, so I think we're going to be in good shape after we get this thing back together. So I'm going to slip this in here, get it screwed up, and I'll be back. Okay guys, so what I did was I got the pins in place, got these gears on. They should go on nice and flush. You can give them a little turn. I can feel the gearbox's resistance a little, so, and it's even both sides, so I think we're in good shape. As I put this back together, I'm going to be a little careful about this cable. So there's gears and stuff. Certainly you want that routed in the right place. Looks like it's a little longer than it needs to be, and I'm pretty sure this is the right thing to do, is I'm going to tuck it back in here where I don't see any gears or anything, and hopefully it'll stay where I want it to when I get this thing sandwiched back together. I'm going to slip the shaft of that motor in. I'm going to make sure these guys are flush. I'm going to do something like and I think at this point I can flip it this way. Try not to bust the crap out of it here. Let's see what happens. Maybe I have to would have been nice if they felt identical going in. So I'm actually, there's a little gap on this side, and it's nice and flush here. So I'm actually going to pull this apart a little, take another look. I want that to sandwich back nice and even, so give me a sec. Alright, hey guys, I wanted to make sure that this was sitting flush on evenly on both sides, and it turns out that as I was putting it back together, that cable might have been against a piece of plastic, and if I'd have screwed it all back together, jammed it in place, not a good idea. So I took it back off, snugged the cable, or snaked the cable the way I wanted it, and when I put this back, everything dropped into place nice and even. So I know that's ready to be screwed together. Let me throw a few screws in it and then flip this thing over and show you the rest of it. See ya. Alright, hey guys, I'm back. I wanted to make these screws really tight, actually. Again, you don't want to be breaking plastic. But I actually went back, this guy, which was a perfect fit, actually didn't want to go down that hole. So I actually hunted around and just got just the right screwdriver. And again, I'm sweating my tail off here. And I just wanted to make sure they're good and tight, because they're on the bottom. You don't want those screws coming out and then roaming around your swimming pool, maybe tearing a liner or something, who knows. Alright, so that's looking pretty good. Let me turn this away, we can get a look at it. So you see the motor and all in there. There's a few parts here that got to go back in place, pretty simple. Make sure this is cleaned up or whatever, which looks alright. Actually, it looks like it's been tearing into something, but whatever. I think it'll do the job. Let me peel some of this plastic edge off. That's interesting. I'm going to go get a razor blade. Give me a second. Actually, there's one right here. Just going to clean this up a little bit. Alright. Try to make this thing like new a little bit. Why not? That looks nice. Yeah, I don't know what this was tearing into to do this, but let's not sweat it. One more. Yeah, there's a weird edge on these, all these guys. Obviously, this thing has seen some battle over the years or whatever, so that looks good. There is a little